Pastor Naomi Barkanik from Spirit of Joy in Clarkdale, Arizona. It's been a while, and I apologize. I took a long vacation. But I had a whole series done, actually three sessions done, and all of a sudden I realized that when I went to transfer it, there was no voice of mine. There was no sound. So I had to take it to Office Max, and they had to fix it. And then came Christmas, and then there was another concern, and here I am. So in case people can't remember how I'm connected with Spirit of Joy, it's because I'm reading to you this book, Wishful Thinking. It's by Frederick Buechner, and it's a seeker's guide of ABCs of all theological words, some untheological words made into theology. He does a good job. Now, I don't read everything he says, otherwise we'd be here forever. I try to hit the high points. And I might add something, or I might not read, or I might leave something out, as I said before. But Frederick Buechner, this is a good book. So let us begin. We're already on the P's, so we didn't finish in 2020. You don't have to worry about 2020 anymore. So we'll just begin and we'll finish in 2021, God willing. All right, the first word is poverty. In a sense, we are all hungry and in need, but most of us don't recognize it. With plenty to eat in the deep freeze, with a roof over our heads and a car in the garage, we assume that the empty feeling inside must be a case of the blues that can be easily cured by a Florida vacation, a new TV, or an extra drink before supper, and again before bed. The poor, on the other hand, are under no such delusion. When Jesus says, "Come unto me, all ye who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest," the poor stand a better chance than most of knowing what he's talking about, and knowing that he's talking to them. In desperation, they may even be willing to consider the possibility of accepting his offer. This is perhaps why Jesus on several occasions called them especially blessed. The next word is praise. You praise the heartbreaking beauty of music and musicians singing. You praise the new puppy for making its offering on the lawn for once instead of on the living room rug. Maybe you yourself are praised for some generous thing you have done. In each case, the praise that is handed out is a measured response. It is a matter of saying something to one degree or another complimentary, with the implication that if Pavarotti's voice had sprung a leak, or the puppy hadn't made it outside in time, or your generous deed turned out to be secretly self-serving, a different sort of response altogether would have been called for. Now, the way the 148th Psalm describes it, praising of God is another kettle of fish altogether. It is about as measured as a volcanic eruption, and there is no implication that under any conceivable circumstances it could be anything other than what it is. The whole of creation is in on the act. The sun, the moon, the sea, the fire, the snow, the Holstein cows and white-throated sparrows, old men in walkers, and children who still haven't taken their first step. Their praise is not chiefly a matter of saying anything, but because most of creation doesn't deal in words. Instead, the snow whirls, the fire roars, the Holstein bellows. The old man watches the moon rise as he leans on his walker. Their praise is not something that at their most complimentary they say, but something that at their truest they are. We learn to praise God not by paying compliments, but by paying attention to God's creation. Watch how the trees exult when the wind is in them. Mark the utter stillness of the great blue heron in the swamp. And I've seen a great blue heron at Dead Horse State Park in one of its lagoons. And their utter stillness, they can stand still 5, 10, 15 minutes. Or listen to the sound of the rain. Feel the cool breeze in the air at night. Look up at the twinkling stars. Be patient and be alert. Live in the now and be ready to praise all of God's creation. The next word is pride. Pride is self-love. And in the Christian sense, it's another way of saying love your neighbor as yourself. And love yourself as your neighbor. It simply means that the ability to work for your own good despite all the less than admirable things you know about yourself is closely related to the ability to work for your neighbor's good despite all the less than admirable things you know about them. It also means that just as in this sense, love of self and love of neighbor go hand in hand, and so do dislike of self and dislike of neighbor. Self-love or pride is a sin when instead of leading you to share with others, you neighbor, the self you love, it leads you to keep yourself in perpetual safe deposit. You not only don't accrue any interest that way, but you become less and less interesting every day. How about the word profit? Now, I'm not talking about the money we make or the money we have in the bank. Profit, that's P-R-O-F-I-T. But I'm talking about human beings here, living and dead. Many we read about in the Bible. Prophet, P-R-O-P-H-E-T. Prophet means spokesperson, not a fortune teller. The one whom in their audacity prophets claim to speak for was and is always the Lord and Creator of the universe. There is no evidence to suggest that anyone ever asked a prophet home for supper more than once. I can understand why. I'd hate to be sitting at a supper table with a prophet who would go on and on and on and to talk about the Lord and Creator of the universe when I was just waiting for the next course to be served. The prophet Jeremiah showed a clay pot to a crowd of Judeans and told them it represented Judah. Then he smashed it to smithereens and told them that this was an exaggerated version of what God had in mind to do to them. Jeremiah was right. In a dream, the prophet Ezekiel ate a copy of the Bible, thumb index and all, to show how sweet as honey was the word of God. I never knew that about Ezekiel. I just remember Ezekiel with that wonderful vision he had in that valley of dry, dead bones. Remember? Them bones, them bones, them dry bones. Now I know he also ate the Bible. In the time of the prophet Amos, the Israelites looked forward eagerly to the day when the Lord would finally come and deliver them from all their afflictions. Amos told them they had better start looking forward to something else, because when that day came, the Lord was going to settle a lot of people's hash, all right. But the hash that would be settled first was Israel's. Quoting God, Amos went on to say, "Your great cathedrals bore me just as stiff as your TV evangelists, and your prayer breakfasts at the White House caused me no less abdominal discomfort than your dashboard virgins. Justice, says God, is what I want, not photo opportunities and righteousness. But I want righteousness, like an ever-flowing stream instead." Jeremiah was thrown into a cistern, and the rumor is that Isaiah was sawed in half. It's not recorded how Amos got his. When the unknown prophet who wrote the last chapter of Isaiah pondered the question, what were the chosen people chosen for? His answer was that they were chosen not to overwhelm the world in triumph, but to suffer and die for the world in love. One thinks of the gas ovens of Auschwitz and of Anne Frank. One thinks of the anti-Semitic jokes in the restricted neighborhood. One also thinks of Jesus, who, when he went back to his hometown of Nazareth and went to his local synagogue, he was asked to read from the prophet Isaiah's book. It is the words of this prophet that perhaps describe Jesus best, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Acquainted with grief. The way Jesus described his mission in this world was to give his life as a ransom for many. The prophets were drunk on God, and in the presence of their terrible tipsiness, no one was ever comfortable. With a total lack of tact, they roared out against phoniness and corruption wherever they found them. They were the terror of kings and priests. The prophet Nathan tells King David to his face that he is a crook and an adulterer. The prophet Jeremiah goes straight to the temple itself and says, "Do not trust in these deceptive words. This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord." It was just like a prophet to say it 3 times, just to make sure the people understood where they were standing. No prophet is on record as having asked for the job. When God put the finger on Isaiah, Isaiah said, "Oh God, how long, how long?" and couldn't have been exactly reassured by the answer he was given. Jeremiah pled that he was much too young for that type of work. Moses sounded like a prophet when he pointed out to God that he'd never been much good at public speaking, and the chances were that Pharaoh wasn't going to give him so much as the time of day. Like Abraham Lincoln, Lincoln's story about the man being ridden out of town on a rail, if it wasn't for the honor of the thing, the prophets would all have rather walked. Most of the prophets went a little mad before they were through, and if they weren't a little mad to begin with. Ezekiel kept seeing wheels with eyes around the rims. John the Baptist ate bugs. Then there's Karl Marx, Friedrich Nietzsche, Jonathan Swift, Malcolm X. They were all prophets in their ways. So was Ayn Rand. So are Gloria Steinem and Rosa Parks. And I add Martin Luther King Jr. He was a prophet. Nelson Mandela, and even John Lewis, the late congressman. Like Robert Frost's, a prophet's quarrel with the world is deep down a lover's quarrel. If the prophets didn't love the world, they probably wouldn't bother to tell it that it's going to hell. They'd just let it go. But a prophet's quarrel is always with God. A prophet's quarrel is always with God. We'll do one more. Purgatory. According to Roman Catholic doctrine, some people go to heaven when they die, some people go to hell, and some people, although they will get to heaven eventually, have to make a preliminary detour through purgatory, where the sins that still cling to them are purged away through suffering. Protestants reject this notion partly because of the unpleasant odor it developed during the Middle Ages, when if you put so much cash on the line, the church guaranteed to arrange at least a substantial reduction in your purgatorial sentence. Remember, that was Martin Luther's time. Remember, John Tetzel was selling indulgences, and if a person bought an indulgence, he could get his mother or father or wife or someone a less sentence of being in purgatory. Of course, Martin Luther found out that they were just doing that so they could get money. The Catholics were doing that so they could get money to build a bigger church. But Protestants, besides that, they also said, our view is that when you are saved by God, that means, among other things, that you are saved from torment after death. What is persuasive, though, about the Catholic view of purgatory is the implication that even with God on their side, people do not attain to what St. Paul calls mature personhood, the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. It doesn't happen overnight. At best, the job is unlikely to be more than the slimmest fraction done by the time they die. An Anglican prayer for someone who has died includes the words, grant that, increasing in knowledge and love of thee, he or she may go from strength to strength in the life of in perfect service in thy heavenly kingdom. Increasing in knowledge from strength to strength, whichever side of the grave you are talking about, life with God apparently involves growth and growing pains. The sacrament of bread and wine administered to the dying, did you know, is known as the viaticum, which means provision for a journey or one for the road. Whether or not you think of it in connection with purgatory, viaticum suggests that many a high adventure still awaits you and many a cobbled street before you finally reach the fountain in the square. That's it for now. I'm glad to be back. And you'll see me again soon. Goodbye.